Really quick, the side decks mentioned in today's video are for the decks that I talked about in my All My Decks video from the other day for set 7. If you haven't already seen that video, I promise you, everything in this video won't make sense. So do yourself a favor, pause this video, I'll leave a link down below as well as the iCards above to the All My Decks video, go check it out, and then when you're done, you can come back here and then everything will make sense. Did you watch it? Great. Welcome back. From this point forward, I'm going to assume that everyone has seen the All My Decks video for set 7, and now you know what decks we're going to be making side decks for in this one. With that said, let's talk about some side decks in the Digimon TCG. Alright, really quick, before I talk about my side deck for Red Hybrid right here, I want to briefly mention the rules of side decking in Digimon, as well as my general opinion slash theory behind what makes a side deck good in Digimon. Alright, so the basic rules for side decking is really simple. You can play any cards you want in your side deck, Digi-Eggs included, and you can have no more than 10 cards. From there, normal deck building rules apply when it comes to numbers or copies of cards. As long as your main deck and side deck have no more than 4 copies of any uniquely numbered card, you're good. If you have 5 copies of starter deck Agumon between your main deck and your side deck, there's a problem. Also, reminder once again that the side deck inclusion in Digimon is not at this moment a permanent change. It is only a modified game rule for the upcoming Digimon Card Game Fest. If you want a refresher on Mulligan and side decks and how they work, I'll leave a link in the iCards above. From there, we have my theories as to what makes a good side deck, and it's really simple. I want my side deck to not only have good cards that could counter specific matchups that I might have a problem with, or I might be expecting in a big tournament. I also want my side deck to kind of be a toolbox that can improve the capabilities of my main deck in Game 2 and Game 3. Basically, I want my side deck to either fill holes or add extra decision trees slash playstyles to my deck that can make my deck better given specific situations. If anything that I've mentioned just now or in the rest of this video confuses you, please be sure to ask a question down below in the comments, or better yet, hop into my Twitch channel. I go live all the time and I love talking about this game with you and helping y'all out. Link down below to that as always, but with all that being said, let's talk about my side deck for Red Hybrid. Now, I'm sure you probably couldn't tell by looking at this, but I promise you this is the side deck for my Red Hybrid deck from the All My Decks video, and if you remember, that deck was built on one thing: consistent aggression. And this side deck is built on 2 things: adding to that consistent aggression and making it to where your opponent's resources are now limited so you have more turns to be as consistently aggressive as you want. Because the thing I've been noticing more and more as I play set 7 is games are not decided by big blowout turns that just OTK your opponent. They are decided by steady grind games that push advantage in your favor and eventually lead to you winning the game after turns have passed. And Red Hybrid, while the version I have is good at doing that, can struggle a bit sometimes given the resources that some of these decks can gain. So we have floodgates like Terriermon and Gaussmon that try to limit the potential of those resources. Terriermon being one of the memory blockers we have access to in Digimon. Right now, Red does not have an in-color memory blocker that we could play, so Terriermon or Modokai Betamon is the next best bet. I'm playing 2. It could be literally anyone, but I like Terriermon the best. And then Gaussmon is the in-color Digivolution reduce blocker, and he also has a second effect that actually makes all the other Gaussmon you have in play plus 3000 DP. So if you ever get 2 in play, they're actually 5000 DP attackers, which does come up for adding to your potential aggression, which is just really cool. The main cards that this one stops are, of course, the level 5 hybrids and Lilith Loop plus any win rate 60% shenanigans. Speaking of win rate 60% shenanigans, we also have 2 copies of win rate in this deck, and it's probably not immediate to you as to why. So in Red Hybrid, you kind of have this interesting balance of really cheap evolution cards that can hit for major damage, like the new level 5 Aldemon or all of your hybrids. But you also have sort of expensive cards that do have a ton of aggression associated with them, but sometimes they're hard to get out, like the old level 5 Aldemon or even Emperor Emperor Greymon. And what's really cool too is you can actually use win rate 60% plus Takuya Kanbara to actually go straight into an Emperor Greymon for just 2 memory. You know, the 2 memory it costs to play win rate 60%. And the ability to have that much aggression out of nowhere is really nice in a game 2 and 3 scenario as like a surprise factor for your opponent, and this felt to me easier than trying to jam in like an Ancient Greymon package into the side deck. And finally, we have 2 copies of Program Shutdown. Because we have Analog Youth in the main deck for my red hybrid list, this becomes a card that we have access to for games 2 and 3. And that can be really good given the powerful option cards that exist in set 7, like Shavot's Lashirts, the purple 6-cost option card, or even some random matchups against like Lilith Loop. Overall, I really like this side deck for my red hybrid deck. I think it gives me an appropriate number of responses to some annoying trends in set 7, but it also can boost my overall power in games 2 and 3 if I want to. Moving on to my side deck for blue hybrid, you'll notice a bit of a trend, but also a bit of a deviation. We have 1 copy of Sayako, 1 copy of Modokai, 3 copies of Neemon, 2 copies of BT4 Kendo Garuru, 1 Magna, and 2 copies of Koji Minamoto. So first things first, in my main deck, I'm already playing Sayako and Modokai, so whichever one is most important for the matchup, I'll increase the number and then probably decrease the other one accordingly. Up next, we have the 3 Neemon. Guys, Neemon is crazy good. If you guys don't know, he has a really cool on-play effect that lets you play a tamer with an inherited effect from your hand, so basically any of the Frontier tamers, and then he has an alternates effect that says once per turn, when one of your Digimon with a tamer card in its Digivolution cards is deleted, you may play 1 tamer from your trash without paying its memory cost. This is really good in blue hybrid, and it's my go-to replacement for Bokomon in games 2 and 3. Bokomon is like the #1 targeted card right now when it comes to side decks and main decks in Digimon, and being able to have a replacement for that card that your opponent cannot stop / not interact with, that can still give you like 6 memory plus worth of resources turn by turn, is crazy strong. Also, post side, usually I'm also throwing in copies of Koji Minamoto to enable a stronger Magna Garurumon package in my blue hybrid deck, and having more tamers with inheritables just makes Neemon better. And then finally rounding off, we have the 2 copies of Kendo. This is again to kind of like target what people are already trying to do when it comes to side decking and building main decks in set 7, and that is bounce back the floodgates like Modokai and Sayako, so that way I can trigger all my memory gain effects like boosts and Hammer Spark. As of right now, Kendo's a bit too clunky for the main deck, but having him here in the side deck is a super nice inclusion. And yeah, that's it for my blue hybrid side deck. The overall theme is try to increase aggression or try to play around what your opponent is going to probably do against you in games 2 and 3. Also, now's a good time to mention that if you guys are excited for this video or gotten any value from it, be sure to let me know by smashing that like button, subscribing to the channel, and clicking that bell for notifications so you know when my videos go live for you. And with that being said, let's move on to my side deck for yellow hybrid. So this is the side deck for my mono yellow hybrid deck that I showed you earlier that had a big focus on Shine Greymon. But unlike the other side decks, the roles all of these cards play are a bit different. We do have like the toolboxy cards like Sakuyamon and Dynasmon that play a role against the more aggressive / like OTK matchups of Jessmon, red hybrid, blue hybrid, etc. But we have cards in here that I would categorize as being for the mirror match, like War Greymon and Blinding Ray. If you guys don't know, no matter what type of yellow hybrid deck you're playing, the matchup goes like this. No one attacks anyone, and the first person that can actually get a Dynasmon in play or a way to weaken their security down to less than 5 is the one who's going to start just gaining way more resources and eventually snowball a victory. Thanks to cards like War Greymon and Blinding Way, we can manually lower our security and potentially gain extra aggression in the process. And then finally, we have a little card over here called Holy Flame rounding off the side deck, and this is just probably the best security effect that yellow has access to right now in set 7. If you guys didn't know, Holy Flame has a security effect that says all of your opponent's Digimon gain -1 security attack for the turn. And this, like Ice Wall, is a blanket / lingering effect. So it applies to every single Digimon that is in play and comes into play during that turn. And as of right now, that is the only way, barring some kind of blocker on board, that can stop hybrids from swinging in for the finishing blow, which is pretty needed sometimes, because while Yellow Hybrid is a very resilient deck, decks can get a lot of attacks out of nowhere that removal just can't stop. Overall, I think this side deck serves a pretty unique role in sort of rounding out the weaknesses that Yellow Hybrid has, but I will say it does have fewer options than, say, a Purple Hybrid deck would, so if you do play that version of the deck, your side deck might look different, and very well should look different. Up next, we have a side deck that's eerily similar, my side deck for LordKnightmon. Alright, really quick, Jessamon is looking to be a popular deck right now, and Sakuyamon is the best answer for that deck in yellow. We have 2 copies of Blinding Ray because when playing the LordKnightmon Electric Rush deck that I showed you guys earlier, people tend to not attack you, and so having ways to manually go to 3 security is really big, and being able to gain memory in the process is really nice. And then finally, 4 copies of Holy Flame. It's even more important to have this card against aggressive decks in LordKnightmon because you do burn yourself to 3 in almost all of your games, and so you're the most at risk of dying to just random attacks out of nowhere from hybrids. That being said, being able to bink one of these off a security might just be the difference between winning and losing. But the last card in here is probably the one I'm most excited for in 2 copies of Kazuchimon. I mentioned this in my must-have cards video, but I love this card. I think it's an absolute sleeper pick right now in set 7, and in this deck specifically that has access to Electric Rush in games 2 and 3, to have a multi-attacking plus security Digimon in yellow is way too strong. Also, the added benefit of being like a way to go from 0 to 3 out of nowhere in terms of your security is really nice. So I might even find room for Kazuchimon in the main deck for LordKnightmon going forward because I just love the synergy so much. Overall, yellow side decks, while they seem kind of simple, I think have a ton of power, and I cannot wait to keep experimenting and seeing what works and what doesn't. From there, we have a side deck that I was really happy to build in my green toolbox, or Turtle Turbo side deck. If you remember from my All My Decks video, the Turtle Turbo deck was a green Ibanwumon toolbox deck that focused on a bunch of different level 6s for very specific situations / matchups. From the original deck, if I'm fighting against like Yellow Hybrid, for example, I'll take out a copy of Nidhoggmon and just play a 4th copy of Argomon. Against decks that have really powerful removal or just an easy way to deal with my level 6s, I'm putting in that extra Ancient Troymon alongside a really powerful hybrid package in 4 Arbormon and 3 copies of the 2-drop Izzy-Azumi. And the reason for this is basically to say, hey, if I can get an Ancient Troymon to stick, not only can I make it really hard for you to kill me if you're an aggressive deck, but even if you have removal for this Ancient Troymon, I can protect myself and maintain advantage by having this Argomon now come into play for free. Plus, having the extra resources from cards like Izzy-Azumi and the extra aggression from hybrids is just a really nice addition, I think, against any deck, that if I want to just add that into my green toolbox deck, I can. Overall, I find this side deck to be super simple, but I think really effective at just maximizing the potential power of your deck given a particular matchup, which is what I think a side deck should be doing. And finally, rounding off the video, we have the queen of side decks herself, my Lilithmon side deck. So first things first, the obvious. We have 3 copies of Neo-Devimon in the hybrid format of set 7. This card is an absolute powerhouse, and given that current Lilith Loop, or at least the deck I showed y'all, is basically a level 4 like accelerator deck, having access to level 5s becomes really easy. Oftentimes, whenever I'm siding in Lilith Loop, I'm just taking out the 2 copies of Nidhoggmon and like maybe 1 copy of Werewolf Mode, and I'm just throwing in 3 extra level 5s because they are super easy to get into play. And let me tell you, the second you drop a Neo-Devimon against a hybrid deck, it's over. Also, Jessamon seems to be pretty popular right now in set 7, so having access to just 3 copies of Rebellomon when you need them for games 2 and 3 seems like an obvious include that might go down or up depending on how popular Jessamon continues to be as the format evolves, so definitely keep an eye on this slot. It might change in the future. And then the last 4 spots were kind of up in the air for me. There were a lot of options like Lilithmon, Gazimon, extra floodgates that were off color, etc. But to me, I went for a mini Mastemon package alongside a Deathclaw package. Obviously, Lilithmon hates memory blockers, so having a card that can actually deal with those floodgates was super important for the side deck. And it was between Deathclaw and Lady Dev as the options for dealing with those cards. And the only reason I chose Deathclaw over Lady Dev was that Deathclaw requires less pieces in order to remove threats, whereas Lady Dev requires like an option card to be played, a level 6 Digimon on top of it, etc., etc. I felt like Deathclaw was just the more immediate solution, but if you want to test both out and see which one works best for you, by all means, go ahead and do so. Because the hardest thing about Lilithmon right now is winning before you deck yourself out, because resource management is a very, very big deal. And having a card like Mastamon plus a card like Promote, which you can call off Mastamon and get a free attack with, is really nice for closing out games sooner before you lose resources. Also, because you have copies of win rate 60% in your main deck, Mastamon just becomes a good level 6 to evolve into as soon as possible, because she's big, she can add to your board and just chip away at your opponent's security, and given how wide you can make your board sometimes with the Eismon engine, that alone can win you some games. So yeah, I think Mastamon's a super nice extra inclusion in the side deck that can bolster what Lilithmon is already capable of doing in set 7. Whereas the other cards are more like specific techs that deal with certain situations that you're either afraid of or want to punish your opponent. This is definitely a side deck I recommend you try if you're playing my Lilithmon deck or a deck similar to it. And boom, there you guys go. That wraps up all of my side decks for all of my decks in the Digimon TCG set 7 format. If you guys enjoyed, don't forget to smash that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click that bell for notifications so you know when my videos go live for you. And if you have any lingering questions or you want to talk to me about your very own side decking theories in Digimon, be sure to follow me over on Twitch. Link is down below as always. With all that out the way, I've been your true champion, Steven. Please be sure to work hard, rest easy, and live well. And I will see you all next time. Peace.